Hello, this is Raghav's Take. Donald Trump wanted to clobber China with egregiously high tariffs. Now, too many people, including yours truly, warned him the whiplash could hurt America but make China stronger. That's what happened. Now, President Trump is dancing with joy that China is resuming buying millions of tons of soybeans from beleaguered American farmers. Uncle Sam is ecstatic that China has released the chokehold on exports of rare earth metals, allowing America's electronics and high-tech industries to breathe for one more year. There's a palpable re-emergence of complacence. That is mighty dangerous. I know that Trump is disdainful of history, but somebody should tell him what China once did and will do again, even more coercively, if the world were to fool itself into relaxing. In the heyday of American power from the mid-1960s through the 1980s, the US dominated, underline this, the US dominated the production of rare earth metals. Mines in 14 states, including California, Alaska, and Wyoming, harvested tons of the precious substances for use in rapidly innovating industries like technology, healthcare, and defense. The biggest site was a mine in Mountain Pass, California, on the edge of the Mojave Desert, whose rare earth deposits were discovered in 1949. The pit expanded in the 1960s with the advent of color TV, which relied on its stores of europium to create the red hues of color TV. By the late 1980s, Mountain Pass produced the bulk of the world's rare earth metals, digging up as much as 20,000 tons of ore a day. Then, China jumped into the game in 1986 at the urging of 4 scientists. Deng Xiaoping established a new government program to nurture innovation and achieve leapfrog development in key high-tech fields in which China enjoys relative advantages. Beijing began cultivating its prodigious deposits of rare earth metals. First discovered in 1927 in Bayan Obo, that's a massive mine on the plains of Inner Mongolia that workers today refer to as Treasure Mountain. In 1992, Deng spurred efforts to capitalize on the coveted natural resource, proclaiming, "There is oil in the Middle East, there is rare earth in China." That's the kind of visionary he was. Between 1990 and 2000, Chinese production of rare earth metals soared from 16,000 tons to 73,000 tons every year. Now, thanks to lower labor costs and fewer government restrictions, Chinese mines could extract the metals much more cheaply than their American counterparts, driving down market prices. Ore fell from $11,700 a ton in 1992 to $7,430 a ton. That's in constant dollars by 1996. American mines, on the other hand, obviously couldn't compete. China cracked the market just as Washington began tightening environmental and safety regulations around open pit mining. A series of leaks at Mountain Pass dumped thousands of gallons of radioactive wastewater into a nearby lake bed, putting an end to chemical processing at the site in 1998. So by 1999, the US was importing 90% of its rare earth metals, from the producer of 90% to an importer of 90%. One by one, its rare earth operations simply shut down. The last one standing, Mountain Pass, also closed in 2002. Overnight, it seemed China had cornered the market, supplying more than 90% of the world's rare earths, even though it sat on just over a third of the global reserves. Beijing wanted to control the global flow of rare earths and all the products that relied on them. So it levied heavy export taxes on the metals. And in 2006, it began limiting exports of rare earths altogether, citing mounting environmental concerns and the growing needs of its own manufacturers. It was a clear sign of Beijing's increasing assertiveness as a major economic power and of America's weakened position. Dysprosium, for instance, a rare earth metal used in lasers, which fittingly means hard to get in Latin, shot up from $15 per kilo in 2003 to $150 in 2009. That year, China accounted for, hold your breath, 97% of the rare earths produced worldwide. That's 129,000 out of 132,000 tons, but exported less than 50% of its output. The true extent of China's stranglehold on rare earths became alarmingly clear after a showdown with Japan in the disputed waters of the East China Sea. On the 7th of September 2010, a Chinese fishing boat smashed into two Japanese Coast Guard patrols that had tried to intercept it near a chain of rocky islands, claimed by both countries. Japanese guards chased down the trawler and arrested the Chinese captain. Beijing suspended high-level diplomatic contacts with Tokyo, demanding, the captain's release. Then the flow of rare earth metals from China to Japan, more than 19,000 tons, comprising about 90% of Japan's rare earth imports, mysteriously ceased. Then on the 18th of October, a few days later, the embargo inexplicably spread to rare earth shipments headed for the US and Europe. The move came a few days after Washington announced plans to look into whether China's trade policies on clean energy, subsidizing exports and imposing quotas on imports, whether that violated WTO regulations. Then, of course, the embargo ended 10 days later, as abruptly as it had begun. But the message had been driven home. US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called the stoppage a wake-up call. And indeed, America and the other major powers suddenly seemed jolted out of passivity. The world responded first with vigor and then, of course, with fizzle. Molycorp, the American company that had run Mountain Pass before it suspended mining operations in 2002, was resurrected by a group of private equity investors who purchased the mine in 2008. Likewise, the Sydney-based company Lynas pushed ahead with plans to develop a new mine on Mount Weld in Western Australia, long known to harbour one of the world's richest deposits of rare earths. India, the distant second largest producer of rare earth metals, seized the opportunity to challenge China's grip on the market. It revived the state-owned India Rare Earths Limited, which had been shuttered since 2004, with the development of a new processing plant in the eastern state of Odisha. Delhi also announced plans to mine the depths of the Indian Ocean in collaboration with Japan. China's, victims of China's rare earth metals policy seemed fired up, vowing to end the dragon's coercive monopoly on rare earths. But then the wily state became docile, especially after getting a rap on the knuckles in August of 2014. The WTO handed down its final ruling ordering China to remove all barriers to unfettered trade in rare earths or face punitive consequences. US Trade Representative Michael Froman called it the end of the line for the rare earths conflict, and indeed Beijing moved quickly to comply. Once again, the world had lapsed into complacence, allowing China to regain its unconscionable dominance. Until Donald Trump and other world leaders were rudely jabbed by China's retaliatory export bans this year, 2025, more aggressive, coercive, and dangerous than ever before. The clueless cohort realized this is not the moment to be happy or relieved. It's a moment to be paranoid, to use every means, including big explicit subsidies, to rebuild production capacities of rare earth metals outside China. And here's a postscript. Global leaders must never forget the definition of insanity. You know what it is? It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So this is not the moment to become complacent again and say, oh, China has resumed rare earth supplies, so we can, not put in our efforts. The world must put in its efforts, redouble its efforts, and ensure that China does not have that monopoly on rare earths. This was Raghav's take today.